Okay, it's October 26th, and today is the opening day for chum salmon fishing here on the Veda River. Saturday, normally I don't fish on weekends, but I got a couple hours to kill, so I decided to come down and do some chum salmon fishing. It's raining as well, so it's not the ideal condition for filming, so I'm just popping at a pretty popular spot. I'm gonna try it out. I see some chum salmon rolling in front of me, so we're gonna do some float fishing with jigs. Oh, this one. Oh, jeez, big fish. All right. This little Technium 9-foot rod is pretty awesome. It's so light, but it's got so much strength. There it is. Right. Okay, that was fun. This is a really nice chum. It's a nice female. We're gonna let it go. It's a big fish too. Whew. But this is a beauty. You can actually keep this. Wet sleeves. There you go. That was a nice chum salmon. Woo. That was a little fun. Let's do it again. Oh, wet sleeves, but it's a good feeling. Yeah, it is, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. How was fishing today? Okay, have a good day. Yep. Oh, jeez. Oh, that was a good bite. Oh, my God. Oh. Jeez. Oh, I missed another one. Just no one. Oh, I missed it. 3 in a row. Oh my God, missed another one. Falling asleep. Okay, I just saw a coho rolling on the other side. Hey, Good. How about yourself?
Good.
Nice fish.
I see some of your video.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, thank you. Yeah, have a good day. Oh, little buddies. Yeah.
Come on, come
Yeah.
on.
Oh, no.
There you go.
Do you need a hand? Here, let me grab the rod for you.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Poor
great
guy.
puppy.
Oh.
Good job. Good
Oh,
job.
I am. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right. Have a good drive. Yeah, thank you. You too. Hi. Good. How about yourself? Good. Oh, okay, it's wet. I've had enough. Let's go home and we're gonna talk about the gear that I used today. Well, that was kind of disgusting. Pretty rainy and pretty typical weather for late October here in British Columbia. Even though it was quite wet, temperature was reasonably good. It was hovering around the low teens, so relatively mild. I had a lot of fun fishing for a couple hours this Saturday. Even though I love cold salmon fishing, chum salmon fishing is another opportunity that I look forward to in the fall. This year, the estimate right now during the season for the Lower Fraser chum salmon population is 1.1 million fish. That is a lot of fish. It's definitely a lot better than the previous 2 years. Last year, the abundance was really low, so we actually had a closure throughout the entire season. Like I say, this is the in-season estimate, so you could easily go higher than that or lower than that as the season progresses, but it's pretty good. The escapement requirement, which is the number of fish DFO needs to have come back to all the tributaries to spawn so we can have sustainability, it's 800,000 fish. So 1.1 million fish is pretty good. This number here, the Lower Fraser chum salmon abundance, is the total number combined between all the tributaries. So that includes the Chilliwack, Harrison, Stave, Alouette, and several other small tributaries that drains into the Fraser River. These fish come back from late September, and the run can last all the way until early to mid-December. They'll just keep coming back from the Pacific Ocean and heading to all the tributaries to spawn. Chum salmon, it's considered a pretty low quality Pacific salmon species. People tend to look down on them, but truly it's a really fantastic sport fish, and they do taste pretty good as well. We for whatever reason, we're pretty spoiled with Chinook salmon and coho salmon and sockeye salmon. We tend to just kind of brush chum salmon aside, and that tend to lead to a lot of abuses as well. People have a tendency not to treat chum salmon properly when they catch one. If they intend to release it, they might not release it properly. Every fish matters. I think it's really important to release every single fish with the best care that you can provide them. So keeping the fish in the water all the time, you got to think about it. These fish have been fighting it. It's going through anaerobic respiration, so it's out of breath in the water. If you take it out of the water, that's equivalent to you running a 100-meter sprint and then someone put your head in a bucket of water and wouldn't let you breathe. So it'll be the same thing. So you take the fish out for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, that definitely jeopardizes the survival chance for these fish. In addition, if you put that fish on land, that'll thrash around, scraping all the slime off, that's a protective layer of the fish. So if you start putting on land and letting it thrash around, it's going to pick up infections once you release it, and possibly it's not going to survive and end up spawning successfully. So the goal of releasing the fish is to let it go back and spawn later on, and if you don't treat that fish right, that kind of defeats the purpose. So yeah, keep the fish wet. If you have a catch and release net, great, net the fish, keep the fish submerged. If you don't have a catch and release net, do what I do in this video, just by tailing the fish, get your sleeve wet, doesn't matter, get in water, get your sleeve wet, tail the fish, and then unhook the fish, cradle the fish with other hand on the abdomen, and then you can, you know, get a photo or video, whatever, and then you release it like that. A clean release feels really good, in my opinion. So let's talk about the gear that I used. Chum salmon fishing, it's such an easy fishery, and in my opinion, just like pink salmon, it's a great entry-level salmon species to go for if you've never done river salmon fishing before. So float fishing with jigs is probably the most effective way for catching chum salmon. So these fish come in, they'll sit around the bottom, and if you float the jig, like this one right here, and it's got lots of feathers on it, marble, and it's gonna do all kinds of action as you let it drift down. And chum salmon are super aggressive, they'll come up and attack it. So there are a few things to look for when you're doing float fishing for chum salmon. So first of all, you want this jig to be suspended a little bit above the bottom. Especially this year, there are so many fish in the river. The last thing you want to do is to drift this jig through the fish. And if you do that, that definitely increases the chance of you foul hooking a fish, which is not what you want. A lot of people tend to think of chum salmon fishing as snagging a spawned out fish or a fish that's close to spawning, a dark fish. That's not what chum salmon fishing is all about. What I'm trying to target is fish like these ones in the photos, the really fresh, bright silver ones that have just arrived from the Fraser River or from the ocean. That's kind of my target species, the perfect chum salmon specimen, which are just bright silver with a bit of a color bars on the side, just beautiful fish. So what you want to do, like I say, you want to keep this jig. So let's say if this is the river bottom, you want to keep the jig maybe up here, and these fish will look up as well. So if they're sitting down here, they'll come up and attack that jig, and that's when you get a big bobber down and you can set that hook. So because the jig has it's weighted, what you want to do is you probably want to use slightly less weight than what you would normally do, because normally you use a soft bead, you use bait, whatever, which doesn't have weight on it. You got to take that into account when you're using the weighted jig, so that this weight and the weight to balance float combined is what you want to do, what you want to use to balance the float. I like to use a 20-gram float. You can go up to 25 if you want. A 25-gram float doesn't mean the float weighs 25 grams. It means that it takes 25 grams of weight to balance that float. So the bigger the float is, the more weight it requires you to balance that float. And the more weight you have on the line, the easier it is for you to cast with the bait casting reel. So if you're just starting out and you're learning how to bait casting, use a bait casting reel, you may want to go up to a 25-gram float. I like to go something a little smaller. Smaller floats tend to be more sensitive, so it's when the fish pulses down, it reacts faster than, let's say, than a bigger float. Sometimes I go even lower, down to like a 15-gram float, especially when I'm fishing for sensitive species such as coho salmon. But 20 grams, in my opinion, it's a pretty standard float setup. Okay, so you got float stoppers on the line, which keep the float fixed at one spot. So let's say if my float is fixed right here, then I'm down to the main line, down to the weight, followed by a bead. I use sliding weights. You can use fixed weights if you want, but if you're using sliding weights to balance your float, put a bead underneath it, so when this slides down to the swivel, it doesn't damage the knot or the swivel itself. Then you tie your leader, which is this part right here, and I usually keep it around anywhere from around 16 to 18 inches long, and that's all you need. Any longer than that, you don't need a leader that's too long. The fish is not going to be scared by this weight here, so there's really no point using a longer leader. A shorter leader also makes the float reacts to the bite faster, because this jig right here tends to drift a little further downstream from the actual weight. So let's say if we're drifting this way now, okay? Let's say we're drifting down, the jig is going down that way, and the fish grabs it, and it has to go down this way, so the line's kind of loose now, okay? It has to go upstream a little bit before pulling the weight down, and then the float goes down. So if you have a longer leader, it's going to take longer for that line to tighten up before the float goes down. So I'm a firm believer in that. So a leader that's between 16 and 18 inches long is all you need. So you have a leader, and then you tie your jig on here. These jigs right here, you can buy anywhere. There's so many different brands you can buy. There are custom jig tires, lots of them. You can just go into the stores and look for them. I find pink and purple work really well. You can use chartreuse and green as well. I think a 1/8 ounce jig is what I typically use with a size 1/0 hook on it. So yeah, so that is the setup. Oh yeah, so let's talk about the line. So the main line that I have here is 15-pound test. It's mono. It's a Maxima monofilament line, and I chose to use a high vis line this time, which is yellow, so it's easier for me to see. I'm getting older, so it's easier for me to spot where the line is. And then for the leader, I go with 12-pound test fluorocarbon. So Seaguar fluorocarbon STS is what I use. And yeah, this seems to work pretty well. I just want to talk a bit about this rod that I've been using in this video. This is the new Shimano Technium 9-foot drift rod, bait casting rod, and I first talked about it in I think it was 3 videos ago, and Shimano reintroduced the Technium series this year, and I am loving it. About a month ago, I did a Shimano photo shoot with these rods, and JP DeRose, who came out with me, he used the 10.5-foot long bait casting rod while I used the 9-foot rod, and that was my first time using it. And we got into quite a few cold salmon, and this rod was so nice to use for me. That's why I just keep using it. And I was a little skeptical that this would not be heavy enough for chum salmon. It's rated between 8 and 12-pound test. It's a little soft, but as you can see in this video, that first fish I got, mind you, it wasn't a super big fish, but I brought that fish in pretty fast. And when you hook the fish, if the fish is further downstream from you, lower your rod down, tip down, and just reel. Usually the fish will just come right back to you, and that fish really cooperated as soon as I did that. And it was a really fun rod to fight with, even though it's kind of light, but I feel like I was in control the whole time. And the other thing is combining that with the Curado 200, and this thing is super light. Just yesterday, I brought both my spinning rod, my G.Loomis E6X spinning rod, and this rod, and I picked both of them up. I was like, wow, this one is just like feathers, so nice to use. And the thing about light rods is that if you plan to fish all day, it can be really nice to your arms. You're going to be doing one cast after another one. You don't get as tired. It's just such a pleasure to use. So you're basically paying for that pleasure. Right. So okay, what's the difference between 9 foot and 10.5 feet long? So a couple of pros and cons. There are definitely disadvantages. So the pros is that if you watch the video when I fought that fish, once I brought it in, it was way easier to handle that fish, especially for someone as short as me. I'm 5'5". Having a shorter rod means less line out, and it's just easier for me to grab the fish, easier for me to net the fish if I have to. If I have a longer rod, I've used a 10.5, used 11 feet before. With that much line between the rod tip down to the fish out, I find it's much easier for the fish to go all the way around you and stuff. It's harder to net the fish. The fish tend to be further away from you. It's harder to hold the rod and handle the fish at the same time. This is, I think I'm gonna make another chum episode actually. I'm gonna keep using this and show you guys how easy it is. Okay, so the disadvantage of this, and you saw this in the video, earlier in this video, is that I had to cast really far at this particular run because all the fish were on the other side, and I was really whipping out there, which is not a problem. The only problem is that when you have a short rod and when you float fishing that far away with that much line out, it's much harder to mend the line. It's much harder to pick up a line off the water because you want to pick as much line as you can so it doesn't lay on top of the water. And thirdly, it's much harder to set the hook when the rod is that short, when the float is that far away. That's why I missed so many bites. That's my excuse anyway. If you have a longer rod, it's much easier to hold the rod up and pick up all the line, much easier to set the hook. And I think I probably would have hooked more fish if I had a longer rod in that case. But whatever, there are lots of chum salmon out there. Like I said, this fishery, the bites can be super fast. It's pretty consistent. If you find the fish, if you float these jigs over these fish, and you can get bobber downs all day. It's not a first life fishery. You can get these fish all day long if you wanted to. So give it a go. It's I think it's such an underrated fishery that everyone should try it out. Throughout November, it will be pretty good, especially the first 2 weeks of November in all the lower Fraser tributaries. And check the tide as well. When the incoming tide is happening, there are lots of fresh fish coming, and those are the fish you should be targeting. Even though the darker fish can be very good for eating as well, definitely use a judgment. You don't want to keep one that's too dark. Meat quality definitely goes down as well. So yeah, lots of fresh chum salmon out there for you to target. Like I say, it's go out there and enjoy it, and only keep what you need to eat. So anyways, if you have any other questions regarding chum salmon fishing, make sure you leave a comment on the bottom. I'm always happy to answer your question, and also just reading your questions, that kind of gives me an idea what you would like to see next as well. And if you enjoyed this video and all of the other salmon fishing content that I produced so far this fall, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. I really appreciate your support, and until next time, good luck fishing.